Kratos' cape drapes in ash where Spartan blood once stained it. Atreus strings his bow, unaware the 9 realms are a ledger of failure. Atreus swallows the light, strings his bow, watching. 3 truths haunt this lesson. Must a burn to outlast a legacy of silence. Father's weapon becomes an heirloom. Laura masks a lesson mortal's guilt, bends but does not a break. Must a burn to outlast a legacy of silence. The northern lights bleed green. Laura masks a lesson mortal's guilt, begins, bends but does not a break. Shadow ends. What if every tale of Aesir and Vanir was a blade turned inward? Kratos' voice trembles. The 9 realms were not a map but a mirror. Each lesson a scar reopened. He spoke of frost giants' fury, of Asgard's fall, never his own hands, slick with the blood of a son he failed. Atreus did not ask why the gods feared his father's name, he only listened. The northern lights flicker, a shadow shifts. The cost was always the reflection, a Spartan warrior drowning in the echoes of a god's mistakes. What legacy burns brighter, ashes of the past or the child who survives them? The answer bleeds in his veins. The 9 realms never feared Kratos. They mourn the father he once consumed. The Spartan forge still hums with the heat of his first sword, iron cooled in blood, not water. Kratos' hands, calloused from splitting oak, never trembled until the night Ares' raid turned olive groves to pyres. Lysandra's voice a fractured chord, asterisk not the boy, not him. Asterisk her lyre snapped as the blade slipped. Calliope's doll, half-burned, still clutched in the ashes. Years later in Ulfhamar's bone chill, Faye emerged from storm-racked pines, her breath misted like winter's ghost. Jotun blood ran hot in her veins, warmer than any Spartan sun. She gave him Atreus small, shivering, asterisk alive, asterisk, a child whose laughter carried the thunder of his father's regrets. When Kratos traced the 9 realms on a wolf pelt map, his finger paused at Svartalfheim. Darkness is not a place, he murmured, it is a choice. The firelight caught Atreus' eyes, too sharp, too like his own. Kratos smelled sulfur on his breath, the same stench that clung to him after Lysandra's death. The boy asked why the realms are a asterisk mirror asterisk. Kratos had no answer, only the weight of Faye's last gift, a Jotun blade, its edge singing with the same fury that once drowned Sparta. The past does not sleep, it hunts in the shadows of every lesson, every asterisk. I am your father. Asterisk, the 9 realms are not a map. They are a wound, and Kratos' hands, still stained with olive and ash, keep stitching it open. The fire crackled, pine resin bleeding amber light, as Kratos traced the 9 realms in ash on the snow. Atreus watched, breath visible in the frost-sharp contrast to the warmth of Sparta's forge, where Kratos once bargained with Ares. The god's voice had been honey and iron, promising power to a man grieving a son's lost hand. Now Kratos' own voice hardened. Odin did not gift knowledge, he traded it. He pressed a rune into the ice, the symbol for Mimir's well. The boy's fingers brushed it, and Kratos flinched, remembering Lyra's touch, her laughter swallowed by Eris' betrayal. Odin's eye sacrifice was a lie, Kratos said, though his throat tightened. The well's water was not wisdom, it was debt. He saw Atreus tilt his head, and the motion mirrored Loki's curiosity, sharp and unblinking. Kratos gripped his sword hilt, the leather worn smooth by decades of guilt. Power is a serpent, he growled. It bites the hand that feeds it. The words were for the boy, the truth was for himself. He had fed the serpent twice. Atreus asked why the realms were connected. Kratos hesitated, the memory of a different question cutting through him. Asterisk, why did you let them die? Asterisk, he showed the boy the scars on his palm, still tender from the blade of chaos. Each thread binds a world, each world a wound. The fire popped. Somewhere a wolf howled. In the dark, Kratos wondered if he taught to prepare his son, or to atone for the lesson head never learned. The fire crackles, pine resin hisses in the heat. Kratos' shadow stretches across the snow, a jagged silhouette against the embers. His voice is a blade sheathed in ash. The 9 realms are not a weapon, he says, they are a mirror. Atreus stirs, the fur of his cloak damp with frost. He listens, but his gaze drifts to the smoke, how it coils upward, how it lingers. Later in the realm between realms, the air tastes of iron and endings. Atreus stands at the edge of a chasm, Odin's voice a whisper in his ear. Break the cycle, the Allfather pleads, his form flickering like a dying star, or become what you were meant to be. The ground trembles. A crack splits the obsidian floor. Atreus' hand tightens on his bow. He remembers Kratos lessons not the names of gods, but the weight of choice. His arrow hovers, then a breath, a shift, he turns, walks away. The chasm swallows Odin's laughter. Kratos feels Ida tremor in the threads of fate. He recalls the Spartan Colosseum, the screams, the lesson he drilled into his son. Asterisk violence is a language. Learn it or be devoured. Asterisk, but Atreus learned another tongue, one spoken in silence, in defiance. A cold wind rises, the fire dies. Kratos watches the darkness pool around him. For the first time, the shadow belongs to someone else. The ashes of Fae still clung to his blade. Each Norse realm he taught was a reckoning, but the cost. The boy who wielded storms would one day inherit the shadows, not the gods, not the blood. The ghosts of a father who once burned worlds to avoid their name. The 9 realms froze under a sky choked with ash. Baldur's body, a spark in Kratos' palm, became the match to a pyre of winters. Fimbulwinter did not fall, it climbed, a parasite feeding on the blood of fathers and sons. Kratos spoke of the Aesir as monsters, but his own hands were older, dirtier. Sparta's ghosts coiled in his voice, whispering that love is a blade kept sharp by fear. Atreus learned to hunt not beasts, but the reflection of a man who had raised Olympus to avoid becoming his father. The Pantheon's wars were echoes now. Giants razed cities, frost gnawed at the roots of Yggdrasil. And in the eye of the storm, a boy carried a chest of truths that could not be buried. What lesson is not also a wound? Kratos' hands, once clean, now held only snow. The realms burned, but the true cost was the boy's ice-wide, not with wonder, but with the certain knowledge that some cycles do not end. They inherit, the gods watched, the frost crept. And the question hung, unanswered, in the silence between heartbeats. When does a father become the shadow he swore to kill? The cape hung in the cold, once died in the screams of gods, now it whispered with the wind's judgment. Kratos carried it not as a trophy, but as a bone in his ribs. The path to Asgard had begun not with a sword, but with ash phase, final dust scattered where the 9 realms bled into one another. That act, not the blade, marked his vow. Never again would he let grief harden into violence. He spoke of Yggdrasil to Atreus as a boy might carve constellations into snow. Each realm was a lesson, how Midgard's rivers carve stone, how Muspel's fire consumes and creates, but the tales were not just maps, they were mirrors. When he described Niflheim's mists, his voice broke where the words should have been steady. The boy did not know it, but every myth Kratos told was a confession. Every tale of fathers swallowing sons, of blood debts that outlive gods, these were not warnings, they were autopsies. Atreus listened. His Jotun blood burned quiet, but his eyes burned brighter. He did not ask to be a weapon, he asked to be a storm. Kratos taught him to wield the cosmos, but Atreus learned to bend it. The boy who once trembled at thunder now danced in its arc. And the father who had once drowned his child in fate's tide now watched him rewrite it. The wanderer's shadow lengthened. The ghost of Sparta was gone, but his sins remained carved into the boy's spine, into the scars on the cape. Yet here was the miracle. The boy who should have been a monster became a question. And the monster who should have been a shadow became an answer. The cape, frozen in time, no longer whispered judgment. It held its breath, waiting to see if the lesson had taken root. The 9 realms hold their breath. Kratos stands still, the Spartan cape a shadow of rage buried. Atreus turns his face to the horizon, a name unspoken between them. What father could teach a son to wield thunder without remembering his own storms? Kratos' voice, once a weapon, became an anchorage tale of frost, and fire a silent admission. The Aesir fell, but the true battle was in Valhalla's halls, where spectral Spartans whispered asterisk again asterisk. He showed Atreus the cosmos not to wield power, but to outrun the echo of a man who once drowned his child in it. Now the realms are quiet, the cape no longer trembles. Atreus walks ahead, unchained by prophecies, while Kratos lingers a godless warrior, a father unbroken. The lesson was never in the myths, it was in the pause between a sword's swing and the heartbeat that stops it. The past is a blade sheathed, the future a step unshadowed. Kratos stands beside Zeus, not as a monster, but as a man who shattered the chains. Atreus walks beside Baldur, no longer a weapon, but a boy who chose to mend what his father broke. The 9 realms fold like a mirror, and in its glass, Kratos sees the shadow of his old self wreathed in ash. Clutching phase remains like a relic of failure. His lectures on realms and runestones were not lessons, they were confessions. Every tale of Aesir cruelty, every warning of Jotun rage, carved a path to answer the question he could not speak: will you become me? The weight of Sparta's blood, of a wife's screams in a burning temple, curdled into stories told beside a fire. Atreus listened not as Loki's heir, but as a son who learned violence was not a birthright. Kratos taught him to navigate the cosmos, but the true map lay in his own scars. The demigod who murdered gods now traced constellations with a trembling hand, hoping the stars might forgive him. In Baldur's quiet strength, in Atreus' unbroken resolve, the cycle cracked. A father's shadow stretched long, but a son's step could walk a new road. The 9 realms turned, the mirror stayed, and Kratos, for the first time, did not see his reflection. The Spartan cloak hangs heavy, its crimson threads soaked in ghosts. Kratos points to Yggdrasil's roots, but his gaze clings to the scar across his own chest. Each lesson carved into Atreus's mind is a blade turned on himself, a father's sins mapped into constellations. The 9 realms unfold like a woven warning: Muspelheim's fire, Niflheim's ice, all mirrors of the man he was. This is not a weapon, he says, the cape rustling like buried screams. It is a reminder. The words hang between them, thin as the line between teacher and haunted echo. Atreus nods, but his eyes trace the ripple of Kratos' muscless, coiled tension of a man who knows every myth he weaves is a noose. The cosmos, once a prison for gods, now binds a mortal to his past. Stars wheeze above, ancient civilizations crumbling in their orbits. Yet here, on this fragile precipice, a new road cracks through the old. The cape brushes the ground, a shadow of Sparta, a pledge to a future untethered. Kratos does not look back, the 9 realms turn. The boy steps forward, and the lesson in blood, carved in silence, becomes legacy. What lessons did Kratos carve into Atreus's mind to mask the ghosts of his own failures? The 9 realms were not just a map, they were a mirror. Each tale of gods and ruin echoed the cycle Kratos could not escape. A father's love, a blade's edge. How does one break the pattern without losing the child? The Norse cosmos became a cipher for his sin.